Welcome all, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am Emily Collins, Dairy Knowledge Exchange Manager for the West Midlands, and I'm joined by Nick Parsons, AHDB's Head of Dairy Development, and our new strategic dairy farmers, Tim and Louise Downs from The Farm in Lameness, Shropshire. I want to start by outlining what this webinar is about and a couple of housekeeping points. All participants are muted, and please ask questions in the message box, which is to the right of your screen. Questions are all private and to the organisers only, and we should be finished by 1 p.m. If you are registered with Dairy Pro, please provide your name, farm name, postcode and Dairy Pro number in the message box to receive your points. And if you don't know your number, then please provide your email address. So I would like to hand over to Nick for a few words of introduction.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining. Due to the COVID-19 issues, Emily is running today's meeting digitally, but in usual circumstances, we would be on farm, and we look forward to welcoming you to the farm and to the other farms again as soon as we can. So over the summer, we'll be hosting a number of the SDF meetings, the Strategic Dairy Farm meetings, and more launches as virtual meetings by webinar. One benefit of moving online is that everyone has the opportunity to join in to learn from the farmers and the specialists as we go. You can also follow us on the AHDB Dairy Facebook page or by Twitter, or go to the events page on the AHDB website for further details, along with the Farm Excellence farm pages to see all of the strategic dairy farms and the background there. Emily, back to you for now.
Thanks, Nick. So Tim Downs is a recent recruit in the Strategic Farm Programme, and today is the launch meeting to introduce the farm, both its areas of excellence and areas that Tim and Louise would like to improve. The Strategic Farm Programme aims to showcase the farms that are really top performers and encourage farmer-to-farmer learning through discussion and expert speakers. The host farms benefit from having a diverse group of farmers intricately looking at specific processes and questioning how and why it's done that way. So please do give comments and suggestions. Each attending farmer should hope to take away information that they can implement in their own farming business. The host farm will also share key performance indicator data, which allows similar businesses to benchmark themselves against the host farmer. If there's an area today that you haven't felt we've covered or could do in more depth, please do let us know in the comments. And if there's any unanswered questions, we'll try and cover these following the webinar in other means. For some, it's not the answer that enlightens, but the question, so please do ask away. So without further ado, I'll start by asking you to introduce yourself, Tim, and give us a background on the history of the farm and how you've arrived to here.
Oh, good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. It's a delight to have so many people with you, and a real honour to host it in this different way. Normally, we'd like to show you around the farm and everything we do on farm, and you would have had to bring your raincoats today because we've had 5.4 millimeters and counting at the moment. So yes, it will make the grass grow, and we're really pleased how it's all looking at the moment.
That's great, thank you.
To give an overview of the farm, we began here in 1950, and we've converted to organic back in 2000, and we're now milking on 2 farms, but we'll concentrate solely on the farm at Lameness, which is where the base unit is, and we'll explain a little bit about what we do and why we do it. We're very much a grass-based system. We have a desire to be grass-based and produce as much milk from forage as we possibly can. Block calving, so spring block calving, and we're currently within our fertility and serving time scale, both here and on the other farm as well. So that's where we are currently.
We've got a lot of pictures to get through and trying to explain what you're doing in the system. But first, why did you want to become a strategic dairy farm?
I think the whole aspect of what AHDB are doing is fantastic in terms of spreading knowledge. I was lucky enough to do a Nuffield scholarship about 17 years ago, looking at discussion groups, how farmers equip themselves with knowledge, and one of the key areas was getting out on farm, and I learned better by meeting face to face with people, discussing things. This is slightly different doing it virtually, but hopefully we can get some good questions going and people stimulate the grey matter. And I think the strategic dairy farm will help us as well as others through changes to our system, coping with new rules and regulations, and developing a farm that's fit for the future, which is changing in oh so many ways.
That's great, thank you. Well, we'll start with and meet the team. So Tim, do you want to describe who you've got left to right?
In the fancy short, well, we're all in shorts really. Sean McKay, he's our head herdsman here at the farm at Longner, in charge of all of the fertility side of things currently. Louise, my wife in the Omsco shirt, who is now the shortest in the family. It's Oliver, who had his 14th birthday recently, has overtaken her. Then Isabel, who will be learning to drive this year, all being well, when provisional licenses are allowed. Myself, and then Taylor Cork and his girlfriend Jess have been with us. Taylor's been with us since his placement from Walford Local Agricultural College, and stayed ever since, and now is a full-time employee. Jess is doing her placement with us at the moment. And then Peter in the blue shirt, Peter Loxdale from Harper Adams. He's our middle year placement student who's done 11 months with us and is in his last 20 days with us before hopefully returning back to finish his studies on his degree at Harper Adams. That's
great, a strong team there. And next we've got a lovely photo of your parents, and they've influenced you with the farm.
Yes, so Chris and John, I think Dad's actually listening, so big shout out to Dad. He runs with Mum the beef side of things, so we also finish over 100 beef cattle for Waitrose a year from the dairy herd as Aberdeen Angus, and he's influential in making sure we make the best quality forage for the dairy cows, because the silage fields are located near Dad, and also finishes and weighs the beef cattle and makes sure they grade at the right level. So we're after a dual purpose animal for that reason.
Thanks. So we'll move on to the cows, the milking herd. And so if you want to tell us a bit about the herd and where we are at the moment in the year, so breeding.
Breeding wise, we've got to the end of our first 3 weeks of serving. So we've been using Eastrotect scratch cards this year, along with Silent Herdsman heat detection aid. This was actually a photo that Sean gave to me of the first day grazing in the middle of February this year. It was slightly later than we anticipated, but first dry day really in February, and out they went for a graze. So you can tell from that there's a mixture of colours of the herd. So Norwegian red influence, New Zealand and Irish Friesians, and a little bit of Fleck V thrown in to give a bit of scale and size to some of the cows as well. So yeah, all destined to graze.
And what method of heat detection are you using? We're using a couple at the moment.
So what we found worked well in the past is an evening check around 7 to 8 o'clock. Catch quite a few then, and the method with Nathan's support of doing reference heat. So for the 3 weeks before we started serving on the 11th of May, we religiously wrote down every single reference heat and didn't serve them, and we've recorded those, which are excellent to look back on a set of sheets all laid out in the dairy office. So that gives us the scope then to look back and see which cows hadn't been cycling, and I think we put 15 up in front of the the vet in front of Nathan and dealt with about 5 of those first time. We have had to push on and encourage the last 14, I think it is, that haven't been cycling after the end of the next 2.5 weeks that we haven't caught, that were just silent. But no, things looking pretty good from a fertility point of view. I'll just refer to Sean and I's notes. So we've got to a target of 90% served in the first 3 weeks. I think we're on 86%, so pleased with that.
That's great. I think we've got next picture here showing some collars that you use for heat detection, and we saw some tail paint in the last picture. Do you want to tell us a bit about, I know you're using sex semen, so how you use that and the AI process?
Well, we've gone last year and again this year, gone 100% sex semen, partly due to Louise not wanting to rear bull calves, because we find that they're very difficult to market. They're slightly smaller out of our smaller cows. We've just done an overall herd weighing event, and our average weight of cow is 536 kilos. So they're not massive cows by any stretch of the imagination. The heifers would be a fair bit lighter than that. Sex semen gives easier calving, gives us an opportunity to breed the best cows. And we're hopeful we can get some good results with it in terms of empty rates.
And how many replacements do you hope to get? Because you've got replacing for your farm and Webscot, that's right, isn't it?
Well, we've served roughly 360 cows and heifers so far, or services, of which a few of those might be repeats, and a few of those would be with an Aberdeen Angus. So we'd be aiming at 150 replacements for both farms, so that'll serve both farms and give us some contingency to make sure we've got sufficient replacements in the pipeline.
We've got a lovely picture here of one of your bulls. So how many bulls have you got at the moment, and what are you selecting for with your semen that you're using? So
chief amongst the Aberdeen Angus selection criteria will be easy calving and then growth rates. So this is actually one of our own bred ones, and I think that is Eric or Edric, I can't remember which one, that we homebred ourselves. And we manage the bulls slightly differently, because we try and make sure that they don't go off their feet. They're very heavy set on the front legs, so we put the cows in with them after the first cycle. So we've got enough cows in calf. We'll deem when we've got enough cows in calf, we'll put the milking cows that come on heat then as a subsequent service in with the bull. So we've got one sweeper bull at home, one with the heifers, and 2 at Webscot, because they're serving entirely with Aberdeen Angus.
That's great, thank you. So we'll move on to calving protocols next. I think Louise will take us through that. So we've got a great picture here showing you've got some cameras up. Do you want to take us through that, Louise?
Yes,
How
I can.
does it start?
So we carve everything in straw yards in a big shed near the house. We've got cameras set up in all the sheds, so very useful. So I can sit inside, don't have to be outside all the time. So we monitor the cows all through the night as well. And so as soon as the cow calves, we can get 3 to 5 litres of colostrum into the calf, either drawn off the mum or I save some in the freezer as well. We use a refractometer to check the quality, which has been very useful, and it's very quick and easy to do. Yep, there we go. The cow and calf are put into a pamper pen, so where the cow is fed silage and minerals and water, and the calf can be looked after and made sure it's had 3 to 5 litres of colostrum, and then if it doesn't suckle, it gets fed again. And And then after 24 hours, the calf is taken into a single pen. The cow is always taken away first to be milked. It's less stress on the cow and calf. So when the calf goes in the single pen, it's weighed, has a rug put on it, and yeah, there we go, nice picture of some rugs there. So the calf will be in that single pen for a couple of days just to make sure it's drinking well. They're fed twice a day, 3 to 4 litres, or can be more if it's a big calf. The milk is pulled. We feed whole milk from the dairy, and I know this can be a Yoni's concern, but we're very careful. We have some very good Yoni's protocols in place, so any milk that's from a Yoni's cow is chucked or fed to beef calves, and they're very well marked up, anything that's Yoni's. So any milk that's fed is all from good cows that have never had any positive Yoni's tests at all.
That's great.
This is the last picture, Emily, just had a bit of detail on our latest change to a bendy gate. So we can just reverse the feeder in and feed about 30 calves around there at once, which worked reasonably well. We took a bit of reversing training for all of us, but once you got it in there, it worked very well.
That's great. And then I think we've got them outside here. What time of year normally do you get them outside?
So they'll go outside once they're on to milk once a day, which is about 7 weeks old, and if the weather's with us, they'll go out in April. It's usually April. So we kept them in a bit longer just because the weather was awful this year, but then they went out, and yeah, so they're on once a day milk, so it's about 6 litres each, and there they are all out in the field. That yeah, and they're fed corn in the field as well. We vaccinate out in the field, so we vaccinate once before they go out, and then the second vaccine out in the field. They have Risperdal 4 for pneumonia, blackleg vaccine, and Huskvac for lungworm. And we weighed a group yesterday because we vaccinated them, and they were averaging 0.8 kilo per day, which we're really happy with. And we've been strip grazing some of the heifers, which is also helping us utilise the grass.
That's great.
They're a little bit strong. Quite a few are over 100 kilos already. So if we can make them or encourage them to grow as fast as possible during this early stage, it's by far and away the most efficient time to grow size, stature, and capability to milk. And then they'll move to Peter Griffiths, who looks after them exceptionally well at Chatford, and come back to us. So they'll go
weaned at 12 weeks.
Weaned at 12 weeks and go at about 6-7 months old to another heifer rearing unit, and he runs them all the way through until the next autumn. They come back to us in calf, and we'll then graze them on through the winter as long as we can and house them, and then they'll calve down in February. We don't tend to calve them earlier than the block, so they begin on the 15th of February calving with the cows, because it makes colostrum management so much easier.
I see. That's great. So, and do you want to tell us a little bit about the beef calves and the beef enterprise?
No real difference with beef calf rearing compared with replacement rearing, but we do keep them in separate groups. They're grazed round. You can see some of the chicory and plantain herbal ley mixes that they're on, which we plant those for anthelmintic worming purposes. They're on currently a kilo of concentrate, 18% protein concentrate as well, just to keep them growing. We're weighing those at the same time and vaccinating them at the same time as we would the heifers, and they'll go away to a different farm, Chatwall Farm, the other side of the Lawley, South Shropshire Hills, where they're grown on until they go to Dad at the Park or Red House Farm, and we'll be aiming for a kilo growth through the first year, and then they'll build up on round bale red clover silage and finished, and some at the moment are growing at about 2 kilos a day on grazed grass.
Perfect, thank you. We'll move. I've just got a question. Do the heifers get a BVD vaccine pre-serving?
They do, yes. BVD and IBR and lepto on my herd health monitor Shropshire Farm Vets calendar above the office desk here. So yes, yeah, they'll all be vaccinated, and we'll BVD Bovilis vaccinate them annually as well when they join the herd. So that the herd protocols are lepto, IBR and BVD vaccinated.
Thanks, Tim. We'll move back to cows and a bit on cow health now. So we've got a good aerial shot of the farm here. So we'll talk a bit about cow lameness and tracks that you've put in. So how is your lameness at the moment, and do you mobility score? How do you manage that?
We do mobility score as a couple of times a year, not routinely monthly or anything like that, but the cow track you can see going due north from the farm next to some of the dry looking paddocks. I'm not sure when that map was taken, but we've covered all of those in AstroTurf, and also heading in an easterly direction or southeasterly direction past the grazing paddock. So I'll also mention we're on 12-hour paddocks after every milking for 2 groups of cows. So the colostrum group, because all the calves are fed on whole milk as well, we don't feed any milk powder, and the main group are grazed slightly further afield on 12-hour paddocks. You can see the lines of green in the fields closest to the milking parlour, and also the plastic cover on the lagoon as well. We fitted a plastic cover with a steps grant, sure to be about 6 or 7 years ago now, and the lines above are willow trees for medicinal browsing. Contains salicylic acid, one of the main ingredients in aspirin. So the small groups of cows will have access to those as well, and also the bulls in the right hand one. We've currently got the heifer rearing bull as well. So an array of straw sheds as well. So there we go.
We've just got another question. Do the cows also get supplements?
They will, as we first turned them out in February, they were on fodder beet grown at an organic farm in North Shropshire, and silage as well, and they're fed currently they're on 1.5 to 2 kilos of concentrate per day through the milking parlour, and the rest is grazed grass.
Thank you. Do you know how many meters of track you have?
That's a good question. Probably around 4 kilometres of track, something like that, 4 or 5 kilometres.
That's great, thank you. So we'll move on to your parlour and parlour routine. So talk me through that, Tim, please.
Oh, that's one with a pre-lockdown haircut, that was. So got rubber matting in the milking parlour. The routine is as the cows come in, they're automatically fed. That's probably the end of the automation in the milking parlour. We'll pre-dip with foam and draw the cows as they come in, looking for any clots or mastitis, and then we'll wipe them with a clean paper towel, and then the units go on, and it's a simple swing over 24-48 that is very efficient. 2 people milking, and we can milk the 250 cows in 2.5 hours with everything going sweetly and smoothly. We have an automatic shedding gate system into a pen with an AI herringbone race, which if you were visiting, we'd show you around, and we can weigh. And there's Sean and his brother on Christmas Day doing the last. I don't think there were very many to milk on Christmas Day, but it was a lot colder then. We milk record monthly as well, so we can monitor cell counts, monitor fat and proteins, and keep an eye on how the herd are performing. So currently doing over 25 litres per day, which we're happy with on a lower cost system.
And what's your instance of mastitis at the moment?
So pretty low at the moment. We treat anything immediately with adamants and homeopathy. One thing I didn't mention, we're on an American OMSCO contract. So US premium requires no antibiotics. So we haven't used antibiotics in the milking herd for going on 7 years now. So anything that does get treated, so we had one cesarean this year that had to have some vet intervention. She was treated with antibiotics. She's still with us and going well, but she'll never put milk in the bulk tank for sale. We'll ultimately milk her through for calves, and then she'll go off potentially to another farm as well.
Thank you. We've got a question. What threshold do you use for selective dry cow therapy?
They don't get any dry whatsoever. So the first time we used it, as I said, about 7 years ago, we would have dried off about 200 cows, and we had awful worries that we were going to get lots of dry cow mastitis during the dry period. Normally we would have treated everything over 250 with a CMT and treated individual quarters, and before that we would have treated about 40 cows per year. And we had one case of mastitis during the dry period. Lots of straw. That would probably be and we teat seal, and we have a very vigorous protocol with that. So surgical spirit, wipes, cotton wool, probably sticks to the teat too much, so we prefer to use surgical spirit and lots of cleanliness around the drying off procedure. That's a critical time for us.
Yeah. What homeopathy do you use for mastitis was another question.
Lots of different remedies, but the good thing about homeopathy is they never change. Brand names, so we'll be using silica, sulfur and carbo veg for small white clots, belladonna, bryonia and urtica for heavy hard quarters, phytolacca for anything that goes on beyond a couple of days, calc floor for anything we want cleaning out. Lots of different remedies we use and get very good success with those as well. And obviously change of weather, aconite we use, and bruising, foot injuries, things like that, we get arnica as their first port of call. Most people recognise arnica as something we use when we get a bruise. Yeah,
absolutely. Another question, do you know what your main mastitis bacteria would be?
It used to be Staph aureus, but we have tested and it comes back as various different ones. We also get a bulk milk test done regularly, and I think the last one I'd have to double check would be a bit of strep, but not huge levels. And the cell count today will be running around 250 at home, 150 at Webscott. ACRs may be the main difference there, and that's something we're looking at as well.
Thank you. We'll progress on to the farm infrastructure and buildings. So we've got a bit of a closer view here. So do you want to talk us through that? And I've got some other pictures.
So moving up from the trampoline in the garden to the farmhouse to the old range of clay tile buildings, brick buildings built in 1840. The calving shed is to the left, which is nice and close to the house with pamper pens alongside. Not quite big enough for the number of cows we're calving through it at the moment. And then we've just got 4 left to calve, and they're running out onto the paddock on the left and grazed across, strip grazed across there. And then the newest roof, the whitest roof, is actually a silage clamp, and we move with a shear grab round into box feeders for cows, and then the middle of the range of buildings is self-feed silage, which we can access from both ends. So we've stuck with the old 1960s method, which hasn't failed us yet. And just to the left of the cow yard photo is where the self-feed silage pits are, and they're metal barriers the cows push up. There's a few fit cows in there that do have a tendency to break the metal barriers, but I prefer them than electric, because it doesn't put off the youngest, smaller cows. If they get a zap, they might not want to come back and graze. So on the vertical face during the winter time.
That's great, thank you. So we've got you're all loose housed in straw yards. How often are you mucking out and bedding up in the winter time? So
we're bedding up daily, plentiful straw. I'd say we get through a huge amount of straw for the cows, and we're also cleaning out 3 times during the winter time. So they'll come in October, we'll clean out before Christmas, we'll clean out end of January, and then into March as well, if they're still in. Then hopefully they've gone out to graze by then, at least during the day. But the beds tend to heat up a bit more if they get towards a metre deep. We don't like to build them up too high.
Got a question. Have you ever considered cubicles?
We used to have cubicles, but our system is set up for composting and straw muck disposal. It does get a bit more of a challenge putting it onto silage ground, because with the amount of straw in there, it has to be well composted. So the yards at the moment have got the straw all turned and composting under the roof. We find that works very well, because it isn't subject to being under the rainfall. And then it'll go on through the autumn and into the spring to mainly the silage ground, which is the other side of the road. So it works better for us than slurry.
Thank you. Have you ever outwintered cattle, or would you consider it?
We don't really have the soil type at home on the grazing block. The grazing block at home is 365 acres, easy to remember, which currently is all grazed by either young stock and cows. Growing according to AgriNet on Monday at 67 on some of the paddocks that are over 7 days, 30 on the rest. Average farm cover is extremely low at 1827 at home, even lower at Webscott at 1730. Growth and demand is about on a knife edge at the moment, but we have outwintered some cattle. It would mainly be beef cattle on turnips and kale and forage kale, but it wouldn't be a preferred method, primarily because traipsing through mud is not my idea of fun.
That's fine, thank you. We've got a couple of more pictures here. So what are you feeding here? And then we've got some.
That's a mixture of whole crop pea and barley. I think the green bit is with organic straw from the same farm that grows the organic fodder beet, so organic oat straw primarily. So there's a Fleck V breed, a Norwegian red breed, and then the black ones would tend to be more New Zealand Friesian. Some of those bulls would throw slightly blacker animals that would suit our system.
Thank you. And then here we've got the self-feed silage that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, so self-feed barriers, you can see there's a bolt there and an adjustment we can make to try and keep the barrier at 90 degrees to the wall. Silage making technique, it's all put in with a self-loading forage wagon. I have a contractor based at home who does our silaging. We do the mowing with a rubber-based roller to keep the clover element. We don't want to lose the high protein leaf material that Liam Sinclair would have told me is the best part to keep hold of. We'll shear grab the bits they can't reach to stop any dropping, and knock down the barrier once a day in the morning. So pull the barrier back, which slides back on the runners, knock a good 3 or 4 inches of silage away, and then we'll write in chalk on the wall the date, and then we can calculate our feed quantity, and it doesn't involve much in the way of diesel.
Thank you. We've got going backwards a little bit. Had a question: do you put your FYM straight into grass fields, and how is this managed in a grazing situation?
We do put some on the grazing situation. It has to be really well composted. We don't tend to put it on between first and second cut, which is a little bit of a limitation I can see. But our slurry, when we've tested the slurry element, is so dilute because it's mainly parlour washings and a small scraped grid. We scrape the collecting yard and passageways, but the vast majority of the muck is straw based, so we have to compost it as well as we possibly can, and then transport it in trailer loads up to the field where we further compost it and turn it, and then it's applied through early autumn and early spring. We'll go across with a 6 metre weeder tine to incorporate it into the soil, but with high activity soils and a lot of biology going on in the soils, it does tend to break down quick enough if we shatter the lumps up. And our contractor Andrew has a good enough muck spreader now to skitter it about evenly and put it on via GPS.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to your grass area and grazing. If you want to talk us through a bit there and describe the picture we've got in front of us.
So yeah, muddy headed cows, I think that would be in their definite working clothes early part of the year before they were out fully day and night. And so yeah, grass clover lays, will be overseeding any that aren't performing. I tend not to reseed lays at home very often. We think that we get better performance out of catching the right month. I have done a bit of overseeding in March, late March this year, and sadly that hasn't had enough rain to be viable, so you catch it lucky some years and not quite so in others. And yeah, a good array of tracks has really made it easier to access some of the drier fields which are further away from the milking parlour.
And how are you coping at the moment with the dry weather? Have you got a bit of a contingency plan if it continues?
Main farm is coping well at Longner. We're managing to extend the rotation length, not quite up to 40 days, but certainly heading over 25 days, and that's giving chance for longer covers to carry on growing. But if we speed it up too much, then we end up just chasing our tail. At Webscot, we're putting in roughly 800 kilos of silage a day, which is just enough to add a bit more and extend the rotation. It is tighter. How 2 years can differ. We had the best growing season I can remember in 2019 and have made surplus round bales, so we're not looking at the back of the pits in every storage area, so we have got contingency to put in feed as and when we are. We don't want to upset them too much while we're serving them. We have just yesterday started putting in 2 blocks for the farm at Longner, just to see whether that makes a difference and slows it down. Time will tell whether we'll continue that, and also whether this, if we get an inch of rain over the next week, that will make all the difference and we'll be back in front again.
Absolutely. So I think you did mention it earlier, but what is your cover at the moment? Because we've got a question of what is your ideal grazing cover for a paddock?
So AgriNet says we've got an average farm cover of 1827. I do slightly dispute that, because I think speaking with some of the plate meter manufacturers, or organic grass, when it's measuring clover, does under measure a bit. I'm probably kidding myself a little bit, but we think we've got a bit in the bank, and the cows will tell us they're happy enough. They're not charging about looking for grass, and they're milking well, not losing body condition score. So yeah, we're still on a rising plane of nutrition since turnout. But the demand is increasing day by day. So ideal grazing cover would be over 2,500, but it's not always. If I refer to my AgriNet, the paddocks we're going into at the moment would be a little bit under that. So yeah, we'll hopefully be building grass cover shortly.
And what residual would they be hitting?
Well, they're hitting 1,500 quite easily at the moment. That's the aim. The target is 1,500. I'll just log in and double check what our top and bottom is. So yeah, 2,450 is where they're grazing at the moment, and they're coming out at the lowest would be 1,300. So yeah, some of them are grazing below that. These are the in-calf heifers when they've come back from Chatford from the heifer rearing. We go round the calf paddocks, and the blue flowers are the chicory, deep rooted. So in 2018, when we had the horrific drought, which was a bit of a test for us, they were the only things green on the platform and kept us going. And we do, when we overseed, definitely include 0.2 of a kilo of chicory and 0.2 of a kilo of plantain.
Thank you, and hopefully they will be helping in this dry weather as well. I think
yes,
we've got a good picture. You've got red clover, is it in here?
That's red clover. Yes, I think Oliver took that picture, so we've got a slight angle going on there, which is good. Artistic license. So yeah, longer leafed red clover, hybrid ryegrass mix, different varieties of red through field options, and yeah, our main staple winter cow diet mixed in with fodder beet and with straw as well. So this is our mower with the rubber rollers behind, makes a kind of job of mowing on a white clover lay there, and we'll leave it to wilt for 24 hours, lay fully out, raked in, and then self-loading forage wagon back to the pits. We'll roll it with a silopactor, and that has really helped consolidate and keep top waste down. And we've been historical users of Ecosile silage additive. We'd always use a silage additive to improve fermentation and reduce losses. And we're using another additive this year, which is from Calving Cave, to compare in side-by-side self-feed silage pits. So it'll be interesting to see how they compare.
And how many cuts are you getting a year?
We're aiming for 3 cuts and a final graze of red clover, trying not to graze or cut too low at any time, because the red clover has a higher growing point than the white clover. And yeah, aiming for high quality, high ME grass.
That's it. Do you know, we've got another question, how much grass per hectare you're growing over the year?
Difficult to get a final figure for the silage paddocks, but certainly the grazing paddocks, we're growing over 11 tonnes of dry matter per hectare per year, which we're really pleased with. Trying to increase that and make sure it's as good quality as we can get for the cows.
That's great. So I think we've got a picture here of the white willow that you mentioned earlier. So I know you've got a key focus on environment. So do you want to talk us through?
Yes,
that
this fits in with our environmental footprint and improving the work environment both for the animals and the people that we work with, our team. So shelter, shade, medicine from the trees, and also storing more water on farm when it arrives. We don't want it all to run off, so that the trees will help to capture and release that without impinging on how much grass we can grow. The cows will graze right up to those recycled silage sheet plastic tubes, which probably want to come off fairly shortly because the trees are a bit bigger than that now. And we're also, I think, going to be measuring the protein and the energy levels of the leaves, so the nutritional levels of the leaves shortly, with a Harper Adams and Woodland Trust link that we've got. So
that will be interesting to hear about. I'm sure we'll hear more. So we've come to an end of the pictures now, and we're going to go through Tim's KPI performance. So we've got here the 9 key KPIs, because the pictures have been great to illustrate the farm and the way you do things, but the quantitative way to measure the success of your business. These KPIs are showing the conventional measures, and whilst Tim is organic, he performs well. You perform well across the 9 KPIs. So on your screen, we've got the target performance, average performance, and poor performance, and then the farm in the far right column. And just to the audience, if you've got a screen pop out blocking it, then you can just minimise that, and you should be able to see the KPIs down the side. So I'm going to highlight the 3 that we'll be focusing on at the moment, which are important to Tim, and that is the cows and heifers calved within the first 6 weeks, milk yield from forage, and then lastly the full economic cost of production. But before we move on, do you want to talk about any others there that you look at, Tim?
Yeah, everything revolves around getting the cows in calf at the right time and within our block. So if we can front load and have as good a fertile herd, well managed, and that there's a whole host of different things that add up to getting cows back in calf again, clean calving pens right the way through to making sure they're in the right body condition score and well fed and well grazed. But last year we calved 76% in 6 weeks, marred a little bit by some difficulties getting a few heifers in calf, but we got through that, and keeping our replacement rate manageable and good enough forage going into them to enable us to see them bulling as well, and lots of effort in terms of making sure we're catching them bulling and getting them served as well. We use an AI man at home because we're using sex semen. We are all trained to artificially inseminate, and we will be doing some of the later Angus services.
Thanks, Tim. I think we can just move on to, I think we've covered this really, a really important KPI for block calvers, indicating fertility. So I think we've more or less covered that. If you've got anything extra to say.
There's always room for improvement, there is, Emily.
Have you got, and how do you aim to do that going forward?
Oh, there's yeah, different tinkering around the edges without changing the world. We want to make it as simple in terms of spotting them as we possibly can. A team effort really is what makes it work, I think, and we've got an excellent team on both farms that are concentrating hard on this area, and that'll pay dividends hopefully in 9 months' time.
Absolutely. And then moving on, we've got milk yield from forage, and this is in milk solids. And as we say, regardless of the farming system, quality forage is the cheapest form of feed, particularly grazed grass. So that's why this is a really important KPI that Tim's doing very well on. But like we said, always room for improvement, and I'm sure it'll be quite hard hitting when you have weather like this.
Yes.
At the moment.
Definitely, and no, we having visited New Zealand on a couple of occasions, have followed their concentration on grazed grass, and it fits our system well. It's what the market and the organic processors or milk buyer on OMSCO, our cooperative require. So yeah, we want to have as many days at grass as we possibly can. It is, as you say, the cheapest feed.
And finally, we've got a financial KPI, so the full economic cost of production. I know, Tim, you might want to mention you use CFPs and part of discussion groups. It's obviously a key figure.
Yes, CFPs are very useful. Sadly, I missed the CFP meeting, but the lads go along and talk through all the data, and Ian Brown sat down with star grazers, and yeah, lots of discussion around how we can control our costs, look at maximising our milk from our own production capabilities on farm in terms of grazed grass. And as it says, the value of homegrown cereals and proteins. We are growing 25 acres of whole crop oats this year. We grew pea and barley last year. The fields that came up for reseeding suited oat production slightly better than pea and barley, and we'll once harvested, we'll put those back into red clover hybrid ryegrass mixes.
That's great. So thank you, Tim. I don't know if anyone has seen, but to benchmark yourself, you can go to the AHDB website where we've got a KPI calculator, and the link will also be sent out following the webinar. So this is a really useful tool. Tim's KPIs will be published on the website, so it's easy to go on. You can look at your own and benchmark yourself against Tim and all our other SDF farms. So for now, thank you. We're going to move on to areas to focus on in future meetings. Like Tim said, there's always room for improvement, and a couple of areas we're going to focus on are reducing mastitis instances, investment into a new calving shed, like you said, you'd like a bit more room, improving environmental footprint, and remaining a positive and friendly place to work. Our next meeting will be in October at some point, to be confirmed, and that will be focusing on maximising milk from forage. You got anything to add in those areas, Tim?
Yeah, they're all good areas that we're working on. So as someone mentioned in one of the questions, analysing with our vet the mastitis causative factors, reducing pressure in the calving shed. So we did have a few cases of E. coli mastitis this year, which could have been linked with a bit of pressure in there, but plenty of clean straw, and we're still getting to the bottom of that. Improving our environmental footprint, so tree planting, involvement with elms, the environmental land management scheme as a continuation of our countryside stewardship and higher level stewardship we're within. And yeah, it's all been a difficult time for people. We are so lucky working outside on a farm during the coronavirus, and then looking forward to trade, and we probably shouldn't mention Brexit as well. And there's so many different things that we are seeing change as we gradually metamorphosize out of lockdown into a whole new world. We'll hopefully, I'm seeing people looking at local produced food in a whole different fashion. The people who've got doorstep deliveries, or what are they, bottling, self-service vending machines. That's machines, yeah. They're seeing huge increases in production, and I think one of the strategic dairy farms has, if not more, have got vending machines. So we're seeing different changes in how people market their milk, and yeah, that's very positive.
Challenges and opportunities, as always.
Yes.
So for now, we'll hand over to Nick Parsons for a bit more information on the farm programme before we have any final questions. So you've got a few minutes to get your questions in whilst Nick talks.
Thanks, Emily, and thank you, Tim and Louise. What a great introduction to the farm. So I just wanted to take it slightly wider, give you a picture of what the strategic dairy farm is, and how the network's building. So it's, as we see it from AHDB, one of the key ways we're engaging with our customers, our levy payers, and the stakeholders within the industry, and trying to encourage farmers to engage with the group that we're building. So that network of 25 plus farms that we're aiming for, geographically spread across the country, and I'll show you those in a minute or so. It forms the wider part of the cross-sector, AHDB's cross-sector farm excellence platform, and there's now a surplus of 100 farms nationwide. They're all farm part across our sectors that we work within, and that's our way, and will continue to be our way of focusing, trying to encourage farmers to learn from one another. The support financially has been coming from the levy, but also alongside that, within Wales, we've had Welsh Government support from the EU funding, as well as alongside that, farms supported by the Betty Laws Foundation, which is Volac's charitable arm, and they've put money towards supporting a number of farms through a 6-year programme of taking the strategic dairy farm initiative forward, concentrating on trying to improve productivity across the group. So star grazers was mentioned, and I think what I'd like to see and how we build this is very much as an open discussion group. It's encouraging all farmers to have that opportunity to come together, to compare the way that we talk and compare farms, learning from a peer-to-peer situation of farmer to farmer, both encouraging not only Tim in this case to be able to learn from farmers who are coming on farm when we get to that point, but also highlighting really how well this has worked today. With the number of questions we've worked through today has been brilliant, and I'm really encouraged that this could well also fit into the way that we run strategic dairy farms in the future as well. So it's that benchmarking piece that Emily has talked about. It's using those KPIs to encourage farmers to compare, whether using their consultants or going on to AHDB, to look at the KPIs, as Emily talked about, comparing and improving productivity. Thanks, Emily. So as that network is developing, we hope to have farmers in your vicinity and your local area that you'll be able to tie into. They are very much targeted around the optimal dairy systems of block calving, with Tim as a spring. We're launching an autumn block calving farm tomorrow, Dan Burdett. He's the blue star down in Sussex. And a number of other farms are launching into the summer with all year round, new all year round farms up in the north. But you can see the group that we've had up to now and the red stars where we've launched this year, 3 further farms. So we're getting that spread, and we hope that not only physically when we get back on farm you can get to a farm which is close to you, but also, and I think importantly, you can follow those farms on the AHDB website and be able to follow their journey, understand their challenges as well as the areas where they excel, and be able to go forward. So we'll launch those as we go. So learnings, I think, from today, very much across both organic for those organic farmers who have tied into the meeting today, but also, I think more importantly, or as importantly, the conventional farmers understanding some of the things that we can learn from organic farming and just dairy farming in general. Thank you, Tim, Louise, for sharing some of your top tips in a medium that isn't natural, but I think we're all getting used to and starting to make the best use of digital. And thank you for the questions so far. I think there's some more. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Nick. So yeah, at the moment we've got lots of questions coming in. So Tim, I'm going to fire away at you.
Go ahead. I can't see myself, which is good.
Do you pasteurize calf milk?
No, we don't pasteurize calf milk at the moment. It's something we have toyed with. We think our protocols of sorting out Yoni's cows, we test with NMR 4 times a year and separate them and make sure they never get into the calf trailer. We also don't put heifers because they won't necessarily have had a Yoni's test. They won't go into the calfateria trailer either. That's the main Yoni's reason, but we're roughly feeding about 1,500 litres of milk in the mornings at the peak, so that takes quite a bit of pasteurising for calves, about 250 calves fed. So yeah, it's a big investment, that is, and something we ought to consider. I'd like to know people's opinions on that.
And another question, how much do you spend on homeopathy?
That's a good question. I just bought a few more remedies. It'd be about £500 a year, something like that, on various spray remedies. But something also that came up, we also use fluid therapy a lot if animals are under the weather or dehydrated. So those would be a next port of call, and anti-inflammatories as well.
Yeah, I think the other question was, do you pump cows with fluids for mastitis?
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah. Do you use herbal lays? Do you think plate metering is accurate for managing them?
Herbal lays and plate meters. We do measure herbal lays with a plate meter, and yeah, they would be harder to get an accurate reading for. I tend to think there's more dry matter in some of our herbal lays than the plate meter gives a reading for. So that gives us a bit of a buffer. We don't change it. We still use the same calculations as all the other farmers, 640 by 125, and that works all year round for us. We don't adjust it at any part of the year.
And what was the decision behind antibiotic free?
There was a group set up a year before us in Wales, and we were looking at those through OMSCO. They were able to access a market through OMSCO that was developing, created links with America. I was lucky enough to sit on the board of directors for OMSCO and go out and represent OMSCO in America. And they were desperately short of butterfat and cheese in particular. So we thought to access that market, we need to be operating under their same guidelines and systems. So it has opened up a whole new world to us. And we've had vets come over from America, or doctors as they call them, and they're much more knowledgeable in terms of tinctures and other remedies that we don't necessarily use over here as well. But not to say we don't use our vets extensively, they're very supportive.
Yeah, that's great. How do you control flies?
Flies, citronella, big fans. We also have planted 20 walnut trees that give off a pheromone around the milking parlour, and they're growing. They're over 8 feet tall now, so hopefully those will be reducing them. And then sticky tape. So that works pretty well in the milking parlour. Keeps them at a manageable level.
Level. Another one, assuming you feed 1 ton of concentrate per cow, how and when is this fed?
So it'll be fed, well, we're roughly between 500 and a ton per cow per year, and it'll be fed primarily to meet demand and replace the shoulders, I suppose, in the spring. The most efficient time to feed it would be in the spring. We don't tend to feed heavily as they're coming towards drying off around Christmas time. That's replaced by fodder beet, so that the vast majority is fed now as we speak.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we'll leave that as the last one because I know we have run over a little bit. So thank you very much to Tim and Louise, and thank you for all your questions. It's been really good. If you can follow Tim's journey and story online by going to the AHDB website, and I think the link will be shared after this webinar as well. Please do keep up to date with all our strategic farms, and we're on Twitter and Facebook as well. If there's an area you think we could have gone into more detail or you want to know more about, then please give me an email or a call. My details are on the website. So thank you everyone, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you for
listening. Go have a sit down in a dark room now, I think.
Very good, everybody.
Cheerio.